Hi, Lance Walker at Michael Johnson Performance Center, and today we're utilizing the PowerVibe Zen Pro 5900 to improve our efficiency and our motor patterning in the weight room. Today, Brian is going to demonstrate for us some of the common faults we see in a very good but sometimes undercoached exercise, the Romanian deadlift. Brian's going to attach himself to the bar here and demonstrate a proper RDL first. A typical RDL pattern that we look for here is a hip dominant move posteriorly, which loads the glutes and the hamstrings, a nice stable lumbar spine, and a slight bend in the knee. That's a very hard and very difficult to understand as a young athlete, especially with load. And so one of the compensations that we see a lot is a lack of this translation of the hip joint backwards. Usually an athlete we'll see start out this way. They'll start out pushing it back, and then they stop. And now they know they need to get the bar lower because that's what they see. They don't quite understand that what they're doing to get the bar lower is they're actually flexing at their lumbar spine instead of flexing more at the hip. And so what we need to do is utilize some of our technology, specifically the PowerVibe, to trick up the nervous system, to pull it out of that compensatory pattern and into a more refined or efficient pattern with load. So at that point, we would take this athlete over to the Zen Pro, set our hertz at 30 to 35 hertz, and we'll use some of the basic jump stretch bands and the vibration environment to get after or to potentiate the nervous response that we want when we dump load back on the athlete. And so the two things that I'm going to do, obviously the vibration is going to engage the nervous system in ways that it's not being engaged here, which can translate into breakthroughs of plateaus. The other thing I'm going to simply do with the band is I'm going to translate his hips into extension. What this can do is help cue him as he goes into flexion to continue to flex at the hip joint and not flex at the lumbar spine. So now in this case, what we saw with Brian initially is hip flexion was good, so I'm not going to provide any much resistance initially. So once he gets to that position where he wants to flex forward, I'm then going to apply hip extension through the band, cueing him, and thereby graining in a bit more of a deeper pattern of hip flexion without lumbar flexion. And again, in the vibration environment, this exercise is done in a lot of different places, a lot of different ways, but in a vibration environment using the Zen Pro, we tend to get a much quicker change in motor pattern and a much longer responsive potentiation when we move back over to load. So in between sets, we're right back over into the loaded RDL, and hopefully what we see with the addition of the Vibe into some basic RNT type training is a much more fluid, a much more ingrained, and a much longer lasting motor effect. The RDL improved by some RNT training on the PowerVibe.